Ma'am, you need to step away from the children. The social worker's voice cut through the December rain like a blade, but Elena Vasquez didn't move. She knelt on the cracked pavement beside the bus station dumpster, her worn coat already soaked through, staring at 3 pairs of hollow eyes that belonged to children who couldn't be more than 7 years old. "They're dying," Elena whispered, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The triplets, 2 boys and a girl, huddled together in a cardboard box that was dissolving in the rain. Their lips were blue, their clothes nothing more than rags, and the smallest boy's breathing came in shallow, desperate gasps. "That's not your responsibility," the social worker said, clipboard clutched against her chest like armor. "We've called Child Protective Services. They'll handle this." Elena's hands trembled as she reached toward the children, and the little girl, barely conscious, tried to shrink further into the box. "When will they come? Could be hours. Could be tomorrow. The system is overwhelmed, and with the holidays, they'll be dead by tomorrow." Elena's voice cracked. She'd been walking home from her night shift at the diner when she heard the crying. Weak, pitiful sounds that most people would have ignored. But Elena had lost her own child 5 years ago, stillborn at 8 months, and that cry had torn through her chest like a physical wound. The social worker sighed. "Look, I understand you want to help, but you can't just take random children. There are procedures, background checks, home visits. I'm taking them." Elena stood up, her decision crystallizing like ice in her veins. "Right now?" "Ma'am, that's kidnapping." "Then arrest me." Elena bent down and scooped up the smallest boy, feeling how light he was, how his tiny body shook with fever. "But I'm not leaving them here to die." The other 2 children looked up at her with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. The girl whispered something in a language Elena didn't recognize, but the meaning was universal. "Please." "What's your name?" the social worker asked, pen poised over her clipboard. "Elena Vasquez. 1247 Maple Street, apartment 2B. Elena gathered the other 2 children, one under each arm. They were so malnourished they felt like bundles of sticks. "You can find me there when you're ready to do the paperwork." As Elena walked away, the social worker called after her. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. These kids could have diseases, behavioral problems, trauma. You're throwing your life away." Elena didn't turn around. She just held the children tighter and whispered, "Sometimes throwing your life away is the only way to find it." "Hey, my friend, hope you're doing well. Drop a comment and let me know how you're feeling about this story so far and where you are watching from. Some stories are too close to my heart to share on YouTube. I send those, along with little life lessons and surprises, to my email circle. If you'd like to be part of it, you can join with the link in the description. The apartment Elena brought them to was barely larger than the cardboard box they'd been living in. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette with a refrigerator that hummed like a dying animal, and a bathroom where the shower only worked if you hit the pipes just right. But it was warm, and it was clean, and when Elena laid the children on her bed and covered them with every blanket she owned, she saw something she hadn't seen in their eyes before: safety. The smallest boy, she would later learn his name was Marcus, opened his eyes and looked directly at her. "Are you an angel?" he whispered in broken English. Elena's throat tightened. "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who couldn't walk away." The girl, Sophia, reached out with a trembling hand and touched Elena's face. "Mama?" The word hit Elena like a physical blow. She'd never been called Mama before. Never thought she would be. At 32, she'd resigned herself to a life of solitude, working double shifts to pay rent on an apartment that felt more like a prison than a home. "If you want me to be," Elena whispered back. The 3rd child, David, had been silent since she'd found them. But now he spoke, his voice hoarse and careful. "People always leave." Elena looked into his eyes, old eyes in a young face, eyes that had seen too much, and made a promise that would define the next 20 years of her life. "I'm not people. I'm your mother now. And mothers don't leave." But even as she spoke those words, Elena could hear her neighbor Mrs. Patterson through the thin walls, already on the phone with someone. "She's lost her mind, taking in those street rats. Mark my words, this will end badly. Very badly." Elena pulled the children closer, not knowing that Mrs. Patterson was talking to Victoria Blackwood, the wealthiest woman in town, the woman who had fired Elena from her housekeeping job 3 years earlier for the crime of asking for a raise to afford her father's cancer treatments. And she certainly didn't know that Victoria Blackwood was already planning to make Elena's life a living hell. starting with an anonymous call to Child Protective Services claiming Elena was an unfit guardian who would probably end up stealing food to feed those brats. And when she gets caught, she'll end up in prison where she belongs. The children fell asleep in Elena's arms, their breathing finally steady and warm. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the last traces of their old life. But in the darkness beyond Elena's window, forces were already moving against her. Forces that would spend the next 20 years trying to destroy the family she was determined to build. Elena kissed each child's forehead and whispered a prayer she hadn't said since her own child died. Please God, let me be enough for them. She had no way of knowing that 20 years later, they would be more than enough for her. The first knock on her door came at 6 a.m. the next morning. Elena opened it to find 2 police officers and a Child Protective Services worker with a court order to remove the children immediately. "Ma'am," the lead officer said, "we have reports that you've unlawfully taken custody of 3 minors. We need you to surrender them now." Behind the officials, Elena could see Mrs. Patterson. "Then investigate," Elena said quietly. "But those children aren't going anywhere until you prove I'm endangering them. And good luck proving that when 12 hours ago they were dying in a cardboard box." The standoff lasted 3 hours. During that time, the children woke up, ate their first real meal in weeks, and clung to Elena like she was their lifeline. Which she realized she was. When the officials finally left, temporarily defeated by Elena's knowledge of her rights and the children's obvious improvement, Elena knew this was just the beginning. Victoria Blackwood had money, influence, and a 20-year grudge. Elena had nothing but love and determination. It would have to be enough. Because as she watched the black Mercedes drive away, Elena made another promise. This one to herself. No matter what it cost her, no matter what she had to sacrifice, she would protect these children. Even if it killed her. She just never imagined that 20 years later, it almost would. The legal battle for custody took 6 months, and Elena lost 15 pounds she couldn't afford to lose. Every penny she'd saved went to a court-appointed attorney who seemed more interested in his lunch than her case. But somehow, through a combination of the children's obvious attachment to her, their improved health, and the complete absence of any other family willing to take them, Elena won. The day the judge signed the adoption papers, Marcus, Sophia, and David officially became Marcus, Sophia, and David Vasquez. Elena cried so hard she couldn't sign her name properly the first time. "Why are you sad, Mama?" Sophia asked, tugging on Elena's sleeve as they left the courthouse. "I'm not sad, baby. I'm happy. Sometimes when you're really, really happy, your body gets confused and cries anyway." David, now 8 and still the most serious of the 3, looked up at her with those old eyes. "Are you sure you won't change your mind? The judge said we're yours forever now, but people say things they don't mean." Elena knelt down so she was eye level with all 3 children. "David, do you know what forever means?" He nodded solemnly. "It means when you're teenagers and you hate me because I won't let you stay out late, I'll still be your mother. It means when you're adults and you move far away and forget to call me, I'll still be your mother. It means when I'm old and gray and embarrassing, I'll still be your mother. Forever means forever." Marcus, the youngest and most trusting, threw his arms around her neck. "Good. Because we picked you too." But their celebration was short-lived. When they returned to the apartment building, Elena found an eviction notice taped to her door. 30 days to vacate. The reason given was violation of lease terms regarding number of occupants. Mrs. Patterson emerged from her apartment with perfect timing. "Oh, Elena, I'm so sorry to hear about your troubles. But really, what did you expect? This building has rules. I've lived here for 4 years without a single complaint," Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady in front of the children. "And the lease allows for family members." "Well, yes, but these aren't really your children, are they? I mean, biologically speaking." Mrs. Patterson's smile was sharp as a knife. "The landlord is just concerned about, well, you know how these street children can be. Behavioral problems, stealing, violence. He can't risk the safety of his other tenants." Elena felt David's hand slip into hers, his small fingers trembling. She squeezed gently, a silent promise that she wouldn't let anyone hurt him with words ever again. "These are my children," Elena said quietly. "Legally and in every way that matters. And if Mr. Henderson has a problem with that, he can discuss it with my attorney." Mrs. Patterson's laugh was like breaking glass. "Your attorney? Elena, dear, you can barely afford rent. How exactly are you planning to fight this?" That night, after the children were asleep, Elena sat at her kitchen table with a calculator, a stack of bills, and a growing sense of panic. Even if she could fight the eviction, she couldn't afford a lawyer. And even if she could afford a lawyer, she couldn't afford to miss work for court dates. And even if she could afford to miss work, she couldn't afford to lose her job. She was trapped in a maze with no exit, and she knew exactly who had designed it. The next morning, Elena swallowed her pride and did something she'd sworn she'd never do. She called her sister Carmen. Elena? Jesus, it's been what, 2 years? What's wrong? I need help, Carmen. I adopted 3 children and… You what? Carmen's voice shot up an octave. Elena, have you lost your mind? You can barely take care of yourself, and now you want to play house with some random kids. They're not random kids. They're my children. They're not your children. Your child died, Elena. I know that was hard, but you can't just replace. Elena hung up. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. The children found her crying at the kitchen table an hour later. Mama? Sophia climbed into her lap. What's wrong? Elena wiped her eyes and tried to smile. Nothing, baby. Mama's just tired. But David was studying her face with that unsettling intensity of his. Someone was mean to you. It wasn't a question. Sometimes adults say things they don't mean when they're worried, Elena said carefully. Like when people called us worthless? Marcus asked. Before you found us? Elena's heart clenched. You are not worthless. You are the most precious things in my world. Then why is everyone trying to take us away from you? David asked. Elena looked at her 3 children, brilliant, damaged, resilient children who had already learned that the world was a cruel place, and made a decision that would shape the next 20 years of their lives. Because some people think that love isn't enough, she said. They think you need money and big houses and fancy clothes to be a real family. But they're wrong. Love is everything. And I'm going to prove it. How? Sophia asked. By never giving up. By working harder than anyone thinks I can. By showing the world that a family built on love is stronger than anything they can throw at us. David nodded slowly. We'll help. Your children. Your job is to be children. No, Marcus said with surprising firmness. Our job is to be your sons. And sons help their mama. Elena pulled all 3 children into her arms, and for a moment, the tiny apartment felt like a palace. But outside, Mrs. Patterson was already making another phone call. Victoria? It's Margaret Patterson. Yes, the eviction notice was served. But I don't think it's going to be enough. She's more stubborn than we thought. What? Are you sure that's legal? I see. Well, if you think it's necessary. Yes, I'll make the call. The next blow came 3 days later. Elena arrived at the diner for her morning shift to find her manager, Tony, waiting by the door with an expression she'd never seen before. Elena, we need to talk. Is everything okay? Did I do something wrong? Tony couldn't meet her eyes. I got a call yesterday. From someone claiming to be from Child Protective Services. They said you're under investigation for child abuse, and that employing you could put the restaurant at risk. Elena's blood turned to ice. That's not true. I was investigated during the adoption process, and I was cleared. I have the paperwork. I know, and I told them that. But then, Tony pulled out a folded piece of paper. This morning I found this under the door. Elena unfolded the paper. It was a photocopy of a newspaper article from 3 years ago. Local woman arrested for theft. Below it was a photo of Elena being led away in handcuffs. Tony, you know what this was? I took food from the Blackwood house because my father was dying and I couldn't afford groceries. The charges were dropped. I know, but the article doesn't mention that the charges were dropped. And if customers see this… Tony spread his hands helplessly. Elena, I'm sorry. I really am. But I can't risk the business. Elena stared at the article, remembering that horrible day. She'd been working as a housekeeper for Victoria Blackwood, and her father had been in the final stages of cancer. Elena had been surviving on crackers and coffee, giving all her money to pay for his medications. When she'd taken a loaf of bread and some lunch meat from the Blackwood kitchen, food that would have been thrown away anyway, Victoria had called the police and pressed charges. The charges were eventually dropped when Elena's father died and Victoria decided she'd made her point. But the arrest had been in the newspaper, and Elena had never been able to get another decent job in town. How long do I have? Elena asked quietly. I'm sorry, Elena. I can't. I mean, you can't come back. Elena nodded, folded the paper, and walked away. She didn't cry until she was 3 blocks from the diner, and then only for a minute. She couldn't afford to fall apart. Not when her children needed her. But as she walked home, Elena realized that Victoria Blackwood wasn't just trying to make her life difficult. She was trying to destroy her completely. And she was just getting started. That evening, Elena sat the children down for what she called a family meeting. "We're going to have to move," she said. "And I'm going to have to find a new job. Things might be hard for a while. Harder than living in a box." Marcus asked. Elena smiled despite everything. "No, baby. Never that hard." "Then we can handle it," Sophia said with 8-year-old confidence. David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Mama, why do people hate us?" Elena's breath caught. "They don't hate you, sweetheart. They hate you because of us." "David, I'm not stupid, Mama. I see how people look at us. How they look at you when you're with us. We're different. We don't belong here." Elena knelt in front of him and took his face in her hands. "You belong with me. That's all that matters. But what if we're making your life worse? What if you'd be happier without us?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Elena could see the fear in all 3 children's eyes. The terror that she would realize they were more trouble than they were worth and send them back to the streets. "David," Elena said softly, "do you remember what I told you about forever?" He nodded. "Forever means even when people try to convince me I made a mistake, I know I didn't. Forever means even when things get so hard I want to cry, I remember that having you 3 is the best thing that ever happened to me. Forever means that no matter what anyone says or does, you are my children, and I am your mother, and nothing will ever change that." David studied her face for a long moment. Then, for the first time since she'd known him, he smiled. Really smiled. "Okay, Mama. We believe you." But even as Elena hugged her children and promised them everything would be all right, she could feel the walls closing in around them. Victoria Blackwood had money, power, and connections. Elena had 3 children, no job, and 30 days to find a new place to live. The war had begun, and Elena was already losing. What she didn't know was that her children were watching, learning, and making their own promises. Promises they would keep 20 years later, when the final battle came and their mother's life hung in the balance. But for now, they were just children, and all they could do was trust that love really would be enough. Even when everything else was falling apart. Elena found their new home in the worst part of town. A 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat where the walls were thin, the heat barely worked, and the sound of washing machines ran 24 hours a day. But it was what she could afford with her new job cleaning office buildings at night, and it was theirs. "It's perfect," Sophia announced on their first night, spinning in circles in the tiny living room. "The washing machines sound like dragons," Marcus added, pressing his ear to the floor. "Friendly dragons." David said nothing, but Elena caught him testing the locks on the door 3 times before bed. At 9 years old, he was already the family's self-appointed security chief. For 6 months, they built a routine. Elena worked nights, slept during the day while the children were at school, and spent evenings helping with homework around the kitchen table that wobbled unless you put a folded napkin under one leg. It wasn't the life Elena had dreamed of, but it was theirs, and they were together. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "Mrs. Vasquez? This is Principal Morrison from Riverside Elementary. I need you to come in immediately. There's been an incident." Elena's heart stopped. "Are my children hurt?" "No, ma'am. But we need to discuss David's behavior. He attacked another student." Elena found David sitting in the principal's office with a split lip and defiant eyes. Across from him sat a boy twice his size with a bloody nose, flanked by parents who looked like they'd stepped out of a country club magazine. "Mrs. Vasquez," Principal Morrison began. David punched Tyler Henderson during lunch. "Unprovoked." "It wasn't unprovoked," David said quietly. "David," Elena warned. "No, Mama. He said you were a criminal. He said we were trash, and that's why we live above a laundromat. He said," David's voice cracked, "he said you probably stole us too." Elena's blood turned to ice. She looked at Tyler's parents, the Hendersons. As in Henderson Properties. As in her former landlord. Mrs. Henderson spoke up, her voice dripping with false concern. "We understand David has had a difficult life, but violence is never the answer." Tyler was simply repeating what he'd heard adults discussing. "What adults?" Elena asked. Mr. Henderson shifted uncomfortably. "Well, there have been rumors around town. About your situation. People are concerned about those children's welfare." "My children are fine." "Are they?" Mrs. Henderson's smile was razor-sharp. "Living in that neighborhood, with your work schedule, your financial situation. Perhaps it's time to consider what's really best for them. Elena felt the trap closing around her. This wasn't about a schoolyard fight. This was about creating a paper trail, building a case that she was an unfit mother. David, Elena said carefully, violence is never okay. But standing up for your family is. Next time, you come get a teacher. The teachers don't care, David said. They think the same things. Principal Morrison cleared his throat. Mrs. Vasquez, I'm afraid I have to suspend David for 3 days. And given the pattern of behavioral issues. What pattern? Elena interrupted. Well, there was the incident last month when he was caught stealing food from other children's lunches. He was sharing his lunch with kids who didn't have any, Elena said. And the time he was found in the supply closet after hours. He was hiding because older kids were bullying Marcus. Mrs. Vasquez, I understand you want to defend your son, but these children clearly have issues that require professional intervention. I'm recommending a psychological evaluation. Elena's hands clenched into fists. A psychological evaluation meant social workers, meant questions, meant the possibility of losing her children. That won't be necessary. I'm afraid it's not optional. The school district requires it for any student with a pattern of violent behavior. That night, Elena sat on the edge of David's bed while he pretended to sleep. She knew he was awake. His breathing was too controlled, too careful. David, she whispered. I know you're listening. He opened his eyes. In the dim light from the hallway, he looked older than his 9 years. I'm sorry, Mama. I know I made things worse. You didn't make anything worse, baby. You were protecting our family. But we have to be smarter than they are. How? Elena was quiet for a long moment. By being so good they can't find anything wrong with us. By working so hard they can't say we don't deserve what we have. By loving each other so much that nothing they do can break us apart. What if that's not enough? Elena's throat tightened. Then we'll figure out something else. But David, I need you to promise me something. What? Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll remember that you are brilliant and strong and worthy of love. Promise me that you'll use that brilliant mind of yours to build something beautiful in this world. And promise me that you'll take care of Marcus and Sophia if something ever happens to me. David sat up, suddenly alert. What do you mean if something happens to you? Nothing's going to happen to me, Elena said quickly. I need to know that you three will take care of each other. Always. David studied her face with those 2 old eyes. You're scared. I'm not scared. I'm prepared. There's a difference. But Elena was scared. Terrified, actually. Because she could feel the net tightening around them, and she didn't know how to escape it. The psychological evaluation was scheduled for the following week. Elena spent 3 days coaching David on what to say, how to sit, how to smile. She bought him new clothes they couldn't afford and made sure he got extra sleep. But when they arrived at the clinic, Elena realized it didn't matter. The psychologist, Dr. Rebecca Walsh, had already made up her mind. David, can you tell me about your living situation? Dr. Walsh asked, her pen poised over a clipboard. I live with my mama and my brother and sister. And how do you feel about that? David glanced at Elena through the one-way window. Good. Safe. Do you ever feel angry at your mother? No. Never. Not even when she has to work and can't spend time with you. David's jaw tightened, a tell Elena recognized. My mama works hard to take care of us. I'm proud of her. I see. And do you ever have violent thoughts? Dreams about hurting people? No. What about the boy you hit at school? I don't want to hurt him. I just wanted him to stop saying mean things about my family. Dr. Walsh made a note. David, do you know what adoption means? It means my mama chose us. And we chose her. But you understand that your biological parents gave you up, right? That they didn't want you. Elena's hands clenched into fists. This wasn't therapy. This was psychological warfare. David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, my biological parents were sick. They couldn't take care of us. But my real mama can. She's the strongest person in the world. How do you know she won't give you up too? When things get too hard? Because she promised. And my mama doesn't break promises. Dr. Walsh leaned forward. But David, what if your mama gets in trouble? What if she can't take care of you anymore? Wouldn't you be better off with a family that has more money, more stability? David looked directly at the one-way window, as if he could see Elena watching. My mama is my family. Money doesn't make a family. Love does. When the session was over, Dr. Walsh's report was damning. Subject shows signs of attachment disorder, defensive behavior patterns, and concerning loyalty to an unstable parental figure. Recommend immediate intervention and possible placement in a more suitable environment. Elena read the report in the parking lot and felt her world crumble. This was it. This was how they would take her children away. But as they drove home, David reached over and took her hand. "Mama," he said quietly, "that lady was mean." "Yes, she was. But she doesn't get to decide about our family, right?" Elena squeezed his hand. "Right. Good. Because I meant what I said. You're my mama, and nothing's going to change that." That night, Elena made a decision that would haunt her for the next 20 years. She gathered all 3 children around the kitchen table and told them the truth. "There are people who want to take you away from me," she said. "They think I'm not good enough to be your mother." The children exchanged glances. They'd known, of course. Children always know. "But here's what we're going to do," Elena continued. "We're going to prove them wrong. We're going to work harder, study harder, and love harder than anyone thinks possible. And someday, when you're all grown up and successful and happy, they'll have to admit they were wrong about us." "What if they don't?" Sophia asked. Elena smiled, and for the first time in months it was genuine. "Then we'll know something they don't." "What?" "That we were a real family all along." Marcus climbed into her lap. "Mama, will you tell us the story about the 3 little pigs?" "Why that one?" "Because they built a house that was so strong, the big bad wolf couldn't blow it down." Elena hugged him tight. "That's exactly the story I'll tell you." But as she tucked her children into bed that night, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that the big bad wolf was already at their door. And this time, he wasn't going to give up until their house came tumbling down. What she didn't know was that her children were listening to every word, learning every lesson, and making their own plans. Plans that would take 20 years to come to fruition, but would ultimately save her life. The war was escalating, and Elena was about to face her greatest challenge yet. But she wasn't fighting alone anymore. She had 3 brilliant, determined children who would grow up to be her greatest weapons against the forces trying to destroy them. The question was, would it be enough? The social worker arrived on a Tuesday morning when Elena was supposed to be sleeping. She'd worked a double shift cleaning the Meridian office complex, and her body ached in places she didn't know could ache. But the sharp knock on the door sent adrenaline shooting through her veins like ice water. "Mrs. Vasquez? I'm Janet Morrison from Child Protective Services. We need to conduct a home visit." Elena opened the door, acutely aware of her rumpled clothes, her unwashed hair, the dark circles under her eyes. Behind Janet Morrison stood a woman Elena didn't recognize, tall, blonde, expensively dressed, with a clipboard and a camera. "This is Dr. Sarah Chun," Morrison explained. "She's a child welfare specialist. We're here to assess the living conditions and interview the children." "The children are at school," Elena said. "We'll wait." For the next 3 hours, Elena watched as these strangers dissected her life. They measured the square footage of the bedrooms, below recommended standards for 3 children. They tested the water pressure, inconsistent hot water supply. They opened her refrigerator, limited fresh produce, high reliance on processed foods. They examined the children's clothes, adequate but clearly secondhand. Dr. Chin took photographs of everything. The peeling paint in the bathroom, the space heater Elena used because the building's heating was unreliable, the stack of bills on the kitchen counter that Elena hadn't been able to hide in time. "Mrs. Vasquez," Morrison said, settling into the wobbly kitchen chair, "we've received several reports about your family's situation." "What kind of reports?" "Concerns about the children's welfare. Their nutrition, their supervision while you work nights, their emotional stability." Elena's hands trembled as she poured coffee she couldn't afford to waste. "My children are healthy and happy. They're doing well in school." "Actually," Dr. Chin interrupted, consulting her clipboard, "David's recent psychological evaluation raises some red flags. And we have reports that the children are often left unsupervised." "They're never unsupervised. Mrs. Garcia downstairs checks on them when I'm at work, and they know to call me if they need anything." "Mrs. Garcia is 73 years old and speaks limited English," Morrison noted. "That's hardly adequate supervision for 3 traumatized children." The word traumatized hit Elena like a slap. "My children are not traumatized. Mrs. Vasquez, these children lived on the streets for an unknown period before you found them. They've experienced abandonment, neglect, possibly abuse. That kind of trauma doesn't just disappear because they have a roof over their heads." Elena wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Because late at night, she heard Marcus crying in his sleep. She saw how Sophia hoarded food in her backpack, even though Elena had explained 100 times that there would always be enough to eat. She watched David check and recheck the locks, his young face etched with worry that no 9-year-old should carry. "We're recommending family therapy," Dr. Chen said, "and we'll need to schedule regular home visits to monitor the situation." "How regular?" "Weekly initially. If we see improvement, we can reduce the frequency." Elena nodded, knowing she had no choice. But as the women packed up their clipboards and cameras, Morrison delivered the final blow. "Mrs. Vasquez, I want to be clear about something. We're not trying to break up your family. But if we determine that the children's needs aren't being met, we will take action. There are families in this community, stable, financially secure families, who would be happy to provide these children with opportunities you simply can't offer." After they left, Elena sat at her kitchen table and cried for exactly 5 minutes. Then she dried her eyes, made a list, and got to work. She found a second job cleaning houses on weekends. She enrolled in a GED program at the community college, studying by flashlight after the children were asleep so she wouldn't wake them. She started a savings account with $5 and added to it whenever she could spare a quarter. But most importantly, she began teaching her children to be perfect. "Remember," she told them every morning before school, "you are representing our family. Be polite, be helpful, be the best students in your class. Don't give anyone a reason to say we don't belong together." The children absorbed the pressure like sponges. Marcus, naturally cheerful, became almost manic in his eagerness to please. Sophia started bringing home perfect test scores and glowing teacher comments. And David. David became Elena's lieutenant, helping his siblings with homework, making sure they were clean and fed and ready for school each morning. At 10 years old, David was already carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. The weekly visits continued for months. Each time, Elena felt like she was being examined under a microscope, every flaw magnified and documented. The social workers were polite but relentless, asking the children probing questions about their home life, their feelings, their dreams. "Do you ever wish you lived somewhere else?" Dr. Chen asked Sophia during one visit. "No," Sophia answered carefully. "I like living with my mama and my brothers. But wouldn't it be nice to have your own room? Maybe a backyard to play in?" Sophia glanced at Elena, then back at Dr. Chen. "I like sharing a room with my mama, and we play at the park. What about you, Marcus? Do you ever feel sad that your mama has to work so much?" Marcus, now 8 and still the most trusting of the three, considered this seriously. "Sometimes I miss her when she's at work, but she works hard to take care of us. That makes me proud, not sad." But it was David who worried Elena the most. During his interviews, he was polite but guarded, answering questions with the precision of a lawyer. "David, do you feel responsible for taking care of your younger siblings?" Dr. Chen asked. "We all take care of each other. That's what families do. But you're only 10. Don't you want to just be a kid sometimes?" David's jaw tightened, that tell Elena knew so well. "I am a kid, but I'm also a big brother. And a son. Those are important jobs. What happens when your mother gets stressed? Does she ever lose her temper?" "My mama never loses her temper with us. She gets tired sometimes, but she never gets mad at us for things that aren't our fault." Elena watched through the one-way window as her 10-year-old son navigated questions designed to trap him, and she felt a mixture of pride and heartbreak. He was brilliant, but he shouldn't have to be this careful, this strategic, this young. After 6 months of weekly visits, Morrison delivered what she probably thought was good news. "The children seem well-adjusted and bonded to you," she said. "We're reducing visits to monthly." Elena should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped 3 weeks later, in the form of a phone call from David's school. "Mrs. Vasquez, this is Principal Morrison. I'm afraid there's been another incident with David." Elena's heart sank. "What happened?" "He was caught cheating on a math test. When confronted, he became belligerent and accused his teacher of lying." Elena closed her eyes. "I'll be right there." She found David sitting in the principal's office, his face a mask of fury and hurt. Across from him sat his teacher, Mrs. Franklin, holding a test paper covered in eraser marks. "Mrs. Vasquez," Principal Morrison began, David was clearly copying answers from another student's paper. When Mrs. Franklin confronted him, he claimed the other student was copying from him. Elena looked at the test paper, then at her son. David met her eyes steadily, and in that moment, she knew he was telling the truth. "Mrs. Franklin, Elena said carefully. David is excellent at math. He helps his siblings with their homework every night. Why would he need to cheat? Well, perhaps the pressure you put on these children to be perfect is causing them to act out, Mrs. Franklin suggested. David has been intense lately, always raising his hand, always trying to prove how smart he is. It's disruptive. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. So you're punishing him for being a good student. We're punishing him for cheating. Did you consider that maybe the other student was copying from David? Principal Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Vasquez, I understand you want to defend your son, but the evidence is clear. David was looking at Tyler Henderson's paper. Tyler Henderson. Again. Elena looked at David, who was staring at his hands. David, tell me what happened. I finished my test early, David said quietly. Tyler was struggling, so I moved my paper where he could see it. I was trying to help him. You see? Mrs. Franklin said triumphantly. He admits to cheating. He admits to helping another student, Elena corrected. That's not the same thing. It's against school policy. Elena wanted to scream. Her son was being punished for kindness, for the very generosity of spirit that made her proud to be his mother. But she could see the trap closing around them again. What's the punishment? She asked. 3-day suspension and a 0 on the test. And Mrs. Vasquez, given David's history of behavioral issues, were recommending he repeat 4th grade. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. David was the smartest child in his class, possibly the smartest child in the school. Holding him back would be devastating to his self-esteem and his future. That's not necessary, Elena said. David will retake the test, and I'll make sure he understands the rules about helping other students. I'm afraid the decision has been made. That night, Elena found David sitting on the fire escape outside their bedroom window, staring at the city lights. David, what are you doing out here? Thinking. Elena climbed out beside him, grateful that the fire escape was sturdy despite its rust. About what? About how I keep making things worse for you. Elena's heart broke a little more. You don't make anything worse, baby. You make everything better. No, I don't. Every time I try to help, I get in trouble. And when I get in trouble, you get in trouble. Maybe everyone's right. Maybe you'd be better off without us. Elena turned to face him fully. David Miguel Vasquez, look at me. He met her eyes reluctantly. Do you remember the night I found you and Marcus and Sophia? He nodded. Do you remember what you looked like? How scared you were? How sick? Another nod. And do you remember what you look like now? David glanced down at himself. Clean clothes, healthy skin, bright eyes. You saved us, Elena said softly. All 3 of you. You gave me a reason to get up every morning, a reason to work harder than I ever thought possible, a reason to believe in tomorrow. You didn't ruin my life, David. You gave me one. David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Mama, I want to be a lawyer when I grow up. Why? So I can protect people like us. People who don't have anyone else to fight for them. Elena pulled him close, breathing in the scent of his hair, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her chest. You're going to be an amazing lawyer. You think so? I know so, because you have something most lawyers don't have. What? A heart that breaks for other people's pain, and the courage to do something about it. As they sat together on the fire escape, watching the city sleep below them, Elena made a silent promise. Whatever it took, however long it took, she would make sure her children had the chance to become everything they were meant to be. She just didn't know that 20 years later, David would use those legal skills to save her life. But the forces working against them weren't finished. In fact, they were just getting started. Elena should have known something was wrong when Mrs. Garcia didn't answer her door. For 3 years, the elderly woman had been Elena's lifeline, watching the children during Elena's night shifts, accepting payment in homemade meals and small favors because Elena couldn't afford a real babysitter. But when Elena knocked that Tuesday evening, preparing to leave for work, silence greeted her. Maybe she's sleeping, Sophia suggested, but her voice carried the same unease Elena felt. Elena tried the doorknob. Locked. She pressed her ear to the door and heard nothing. No television, no movement, no life. Stay here, Elena told the children, fishing her phone from her purse with trembling fingers. The paramedics arrived 12 minutes later. Elena watched through Mrs. Garcia's window as they worked over the old woman's still form, and she knew. Even before the paramedic emerged with that particular expression of professional sympathy, Elena knew. I'm sorry, he said gently. Looks like a heart attack. Probably happened sometime this morning. Elena nodded numbly, her mind already racing ahead to the implications. No babysitter meant no work. No work meant no money. No money meant... Mama? David appeared at her elbow, his face pale. Is Mrs. Garcia? Yes, baby. She's gone. Marcus started crying immediately. Sophia wrapped her arms around him, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. But David just stood there, processing, calculating, understanding exactly what this meant for their family. What are we going to do? He asked quietly. Elena looked at her 3 children, 11, 10, and 10 years old, and felt the weight of impossible choices settling on her shoulders. She could quit her job and try to find day work, but day work paid less and was harder to find. She could leave them alone at night, but if anyone found out, child services would take them away immediately. She could try to find another babysitter, but she couldn't afford one, and who would watch 3 children overnight for the pittance she could pay? We'll figure it out, Elena said, the words feeling hollow even as she spoke them. But that night, as Elena sat at her kitchen table staring at bills she couldn't pay and a work schedule she couldn't keep, she realized they were trapped. Completely, utterly trapped. The phone rang at 11 p.m. Elena? This is Margaret Patterson. I heard about poor Mrs. Garcia. Elena's blood chilled. Mrs. Patterson, her former neighbor, Victoria Blackwood's spy, the woman who had started this nightmare 3 years ago. What do you want, Margaret? I want to help, dear. I know you must be in a terrible position, what with your work schedule and those children to care for. I've been thinking, and I have a solution. Elena gripped the phone tighter. I'm listening. There's a lovely family here in town, the Hendersons. You know them, of course. They've been looking to adopt, and they're particularly interested in siblings. They could provide those children with everything you can't: stability, education, opportunities. The Hendersons, Tyler's parents. The family that owned Elena's former apartment building. The family that had been part of the campaign to destroy her life. My children are not available for adoption, Elena said through gritted teeth. Elena, be reasonable. You can't work nights without supervision for the children. You can't afford daycare. You can't afford to quit your job. What exactly do you think is going to happen here? Elena closed her eyes, hating that Margaret was right. I'll find a way. Will you? Because I've already called child services. Told them about your situation. They'll be conducting a surprise visit tomorrow to check on the children's welfare. The line went dead. Elena sat in the darkness of her kitchen, phone still pressed to her ear, and felt her world crumble. This was it. This was how they would take her children away. Not through some dramatic confrontation, but through simple, brutal logistics. She couldn't work and watch them simultaneously. She couldn't afford help. And without work, she couldn't afford to keep them fed and housed. She was going to lose them. The next morning, Elena called in sick to work and spent the day frantically making phone calls. Daycare centers that cost more than she made in a week. Babysitters who wouldn't work nights. Family members who hung up when they heard her voice. By afternoon, she was desperate enough to do something she'd sworn she'd never do. She called Victoria Blackwood. Elena Vasquez. Victoria's voice was silk over steel. How unexpected. I need a job, Elena said without preamble. Day work. Something that pays enough to support my family. Victoria's laugh was like breaking crystal. My dear, you seem to be under the impression that I owe you something. After you stole from me, I took bread to feed my dying father. Bread you were going to throw away. Theft is theft, Elena. And now you want me to reward that behavior with employment. Elena swallowed her pride, her dignity, her self-respect. Please. I'm begging you. My children need. Your children need parents who can actually provide for them. Parents with resources, education, stability. Parents who won't end up in prison for stealing food. The words hit Elena like physical blows. I would never. Wouldn't you? When those children are hungry enough, when the bills pile high enough, when you're desperate enough, what exactly do you think you won't do? Elena's hands were shaking so badly, she could barely hold the phone. What do you want from me? I want you to face reality. You're a single woman with no education, no family support, and no prospects. Those children deserve better than a life of poverty and struggle. The Hendersons are good people, Elena. They could give those children everything you can't. They're my children. Are they? Or are they 3 strangers you picked up off the street because you were lonely? The accusation hit Elena like a knife to the chest. Because in her darkest moments, in the middle of sleepless nights when the bills seemed insurmountable and the future looked hopeless, she had wondered the same thing. Had she saved the children, or had she saved herself? I love them, Elena whispered. Love isn't enough, Elena. It never has been. The line went dead. Elena sat on her kitchen floor and sobbed until she had no tears left. Then she dried her eyes, straightened her shoulders, and made a decision that would haunt her for the next 20 years. She was going to fight, even if it destroyed her, even if it was hopeless, even if everyone was right and love really wasn't enough. She was going to fight. That evening, Elena gathered her children around the kitchen table for what might be their last family meeting. I need to tell you something, she began, her voice steady despite the chaos in her heart. Mrs. Garcia's death has created some problems for our family. I might not be able to keep working nights, which means we might not be able to stay together. The children exchanged glances. They'd known this was coming. Children always know. There are people who think you'd be better off with a different family. A family with more money, a bigger house, parents who went to college. We don't want a different family, Marcus said immediately. I know, baby. But sometimes what we want and what happens aren't the same thing. David leaned forward, his young face serious. Mama, are you giving up on us? The question hung in the air like a blade. Elena looked at her 3 children, brilliant, beautiful, damaged, resilient children who had already survived more than most adults, and felt something crystallize in her chest. No, she said firmly. I'm not giving up. But I need you to understand that things are going to get very hard. Harder than they've ever been. And I need to know that you trust me, no matter what happens. We trust you, Sophia said without hesitation. Even if it looks like I'm making mistakes? Even if other people tell you I'm wrong? Especially then, David said. Elena pulled all 3 children into her arms, breathing in their scent, memorizing the weight of their bodies against hers. I love you more than my own life, she whispered. And I will never, ever stop fighting for you. We know, Mama, Marcus said. And we'll never stop fighting for you either. Elena smiled through her tears, not knowing that 20 years later, those words would prove prophetic. But for now, she had a war to fight. And she was about to discover just how far her enemies were willing to go to destroy her. The next morning, Elena woke to find police cars outside her building. Through her window, she watched as officers led a man in handcuffs to a patrol car. Her neighbor from across the hall, arrested for drug possession. It should have been just another day in a rough neighborhood. But when Elena went to check her mail, she found a note slipped under her door. This could be you. One anonymous tip about drug activity in your apartment, and those children will be in foster care by evening. Think carefully about your next move. A friend. Elena crumpled the note, her hands shaking with rage. They weren't just trying to take her children anymore. They were threatening to frame her for crimes she'd never committed. The war had escalated. And Elena was about to learn that when you're fighting for your family's survival, there are no rules. But she was also about to discover that she wasn't fighting alone, because her children were watching, learning, and preparing for a battle that wouldn't be fought for another 20 years. A battle where they would be the ones doing the saving. Elena found work cleaning houses during the day, leaving the children alone after school with strict instructions to stay inside, keep the doors locked, and call her every hour. It wasn't legal, it wasn't safe, and it wasn't enough money to survive on, but it was all she had. For 3 weeks, they managed. Elena worked from dawn until the children came home from school, then spent evenings helping with homework and pretending everything was normal. The children never complained, never asked why they couldn't go outside to play, never questioned why their meals had gotten smaller and their mother's smiles had gotten more forced. Then David got sick. It started as a cough, the kind of persistent, rattling cough that comes from sleeping in a cold apartment and breathing in the fumes from the laundromat below. Elena gave him over-the-counter medicine they couldn't afford and hoped it would pass. Instead, it got worse. Mama, Sophia whispered one morning, shaking Elena awake. David's really hot, and he's saying weird things. Elena rushed to the children's bedroom to find David burning with fever, his eyes glassy and unfocused. When she touched his forehead, her hand came away damp with sweat. David, baby, can you hear me? The walls are moving, David mumbled. And there's a man in the corner watching us. Elena's blood turned to ice. Hallucinations meant the fever was dangerously high. David needed a hospital, needed doctors, needed care she couldn't provide. But hospitals meant questions. Questions about why an 11-year-old was home alone during school hours. Questions about their living situation, their insurance status, their family stability. Questions that would bring social workers and court orders and the end of everything Elena had fought to protect. Mama? Marcus appeared in the doorway, his face pale with worry. Is David going to die? No, baby. David's going to be fine. Elena's voice was steady even as her world crumbled around her. But I need you and Sophia to pack a bag. We're going to take David to the hospital. Are we coming back? Sophia asked, and Elena heard the real question underneath. Are they going to take us away? I don't know, Elena admitted, because she'd never lied to her children, and she wasn't going to start now. The emergency room at County General was a nightmare of fluorescent lights, antiseptic smells, and forms Elena couldn't afford to fill out honestly. She sat in a plastic chair with Marcus and Sophia pressed against her sides, watching through a window as doctors worked over David's small form. Mrs. Vasquez? A young doctor approached, his face grave. I'm Dr. Martinez. Your son has pneumonia. Severe pneumonia. We need to admit him immediately. Elena nodded, her throat too tight to speak. I have to ask, how long has he been sick? About a week, Elena lied. It had been closer to 2. And you waited this long to bring him in because... Elena met his eyes steadily. Because I was hoping it would get better on its own. Dr. Martinez studied her face, and Elena could see him cataloging details. Her worn clothes, the children's too thin frames, the way they all huddled together like refugees. Mrs. Vasquez, I'm required to ask, is there any reason David might have been more susceptible to illness? Poor nutrition, inadequate heating, exposure to environmental hazards? Every question was a trap. Every honest answer would trigger a social services investigation. We live above a laundromat, Elena said carefully. Sometimes the air quality isn't great. I see. And your insurance information. We don't have insurance. Dr. Martinez made a note. We'll need to discuss payment options. The treatment David needs, it's going to be expensive. Elena nodded, knowing she had no way to pay for it. Knowing that her son's life was about to cost more money than she would make in a year. Knowing that saving David might mean losing all 3 children to the system. Do whatever he needs, she said. I'll figure out the money. But as Elena sat in the hospital waiting room that night, watching Marcus and Sophia sleep curled up in uncomfortable chairs, she knew she was out of options. The hospital bill would be thousands of dollars. She'd already missed 3 days of work, which meant 3 days without pay. And tomorrow, the school would start asking questions about why David wasn't in class. The trap was closing, and this time, there was no escape. At 2 a.m., a social worker appeared. Mrs. Vasquez? I'm Linda Chun from Child Protective Services. The hospital called us about your family's situation. Elena's heart stopped. My children are fine. David is getting the care he needs. Mrs. Vasquez, your son nearly died from pneumonia that should have been treated weeks ago. Your other children show signs of malnutrition and stress. And according to the school district, all 3 children have been absent frequently over the past month. Elena looked at Marcus and Sophia, still sleeping in their chairs, and felt her world end. I've been working, Elena said quietly, trying to keep us together. By leaving 3 children unsupervised? Mrs. Vasquez, the youngest, is only 10 years old. They're responsible kids. They know how to take care of themselves. They shouldn't have to. Linda Chen's voice was gentle but implacable. Mrs. Vasquez, I'm going to be direct with you. Your current living situation is unsustainable. These children need stability, proper medical care, adequate nutrition, and consistent supervision. You can't provide those things. I can learn. I can do better. With what resources? You have no family support, no savings, no education beyond high school, and now you have a massive medical debt. How exactly do you plan to improve your situation? Elena stared at her hands, unable to answer because there was no answer. She'd fought as hard as she could, sacrificed everything she had, and it still wasn't enough. There's a family, Linda Chin continued. The Hendersons. They're willing to take all 3 children. They have the resources to pay for David's medical care, to provide proper housing, education, opportunities. No. The word came out as a whisper, but it carried the force of Elena's entire being. Mrs. Vasquez. No. They're my children. I won't give them up. Linda Chin sighed. Then we'll have to pursue emergency custody. Mrs. Vasquez, I'm sorry, but I have to think about what's best for these children. I am what's best for them. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your love for them is actually putting them in danger. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. Because deep down, in the part of her heart she tried to ignore, she wondered if Linda Chen was right. If her stubborn refusal to give up was actually hurting the children she loved more than life itself. "I need time," Elena said desperately. "Just give me time to figure something out." "How much time?" "A week. Please." Linda Chen studied Elena's face for a long moment. 72 hours. "That's all I can give you." "And Mrs. Vasquez?" "If you try to run with these children, we will find you. And when we do, you'll never see them again." After Linda Chen left, Elena sat alone in the hospital waiting room and faced the truth she'd been avoiding for months. She was going to lose her children. Not because she didn't love them enough, but because love wasn't enough. It had never been enough. She thought about the Hendersons, their big house, their stable income, their ability to pay for David's medical care without blinking. She thought about the opportunities they could provide, the colleges they could afford, the future they could guarantee. And she thought about herself, a woman with nothing to offer but love and determination, fighting a war she couldn't win against enemies with unlimited resources. Maybe it was time to surrender. Elena pulled out her phone and stared at the number Linda Chen had given her. All she had to do was call and say the words, "I'm ready to discuss placement options." Her finger hovered over the dial button. "Mama." Elena looked up to find Sophia standing beside her chair, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Is David going to be okay?" "Yes, baby. David's going to be fine." "Are we going to be okay?" Elena looked into her daughter's eyes that had seen too much, trusted too much, hoped too much, and felt something shift inside her chest. "Yes," Elena said, and for the first time in weeks she meant it. "We're going to be okay." Because Elena Vasquez might not have money or education or powerful friends. But she had something her enemies didn't understand. Children who loved her enough to fight for her, just as she had fought for them. And sometimes that was enough to change the world. She just didn't know it yet. Elena put her phone away and pulled Sophia into her lap. "Go back to sleep, baby. Mama's going to figure everything out." And in the darkness of the hospital waiting room, surrounded by the quiet sounds of machines keeping her son alive, Elena began to plan. Not surrender, but strategy. Not defeat, but victory. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Elena spent the next 48 hours doing something she'd never done before. She got angry. Not the quiet, simmering anger she'd carried for years, but a white-hot fury that burned through her exhaustion and desperation like rocket fuel. She was angry at Victoria Blackwood for her cruelty. Angry at the system that punished poverty like it was a crime. Angry at herself for almost giving up. But mostly, she was angry at the lie she'd been told her entire life. That good people who worked hard and loved deeply would somehow be rewarded. That virtue was its own protection. That the universe was fair. The universe wasn't fair. But Elena was about to make it pay attention anyway. She started with the hospital billing department. "I want to speak to someone about David Vasquez's account," Elena said, standing at the customer service desk in her best clothes. A black dress she'd bought for her father's funeral and had worn to every important occasion since. "Are you here to discuss payment options?" the clerk asked without looking up. "I'm here to discuss your charity care program." The clerk finally looked at Elena, taking in her appearance, her posture, the steel in her voice. "I'll get a supervisor." 20 minutes later, Elena sat across from Mrs. Rodriguez, the hospital's financial counselor, with a stack of forms and a plan. "Mrs. Vasquez, I have to be honest with you. Your income level qualifies you for significant assistance, but the paperwork process can take weeks, and your son needs treatment now." "Then we'll figure out a way to make it work faster," Elena said. "Because my son is not leaving this hospital until he's completely healthy, and I'm not signing custody over to anyone to pay for his care." Mrs. Rodriguez studied Elena's face. "You understand that without insurance or immediate payment, we're talking about a bill that could reach $20,000. I understand that my son's life is worth more than $20,000. I understand that this hospital receives federal funding specifically to provide care for families like mine. And I understand that if you don't help me navigate this system, I'm going to call every local news station and tell them how County General tried to force a mother to give up her children to pay for life-saving medical care." Mrs. Rodriguez blinked. "Mrs. Vasquez, I'm not threatening you," Elena continued, her voice calm but implacable. "I'm telling you what I'm going to do if my son doesn't get the care he needs. Because I have nothing left to lose, which makes me very, very dangerous." 2 hours later, Elena walked out of the billing office with a payment plan that would take her 5 years to complete, but would allow David to receive full treatment without her surrendering custody. Next, she went to see David. Her son was awake, propped up in bed with an oxygen mask over his face. His eyes were clear for the first time in days, and when he saw Elena, he tried to smile. "Hey, baby," Elena said, settling into the chair beside his bed. "How are you feeling?" David pulled the mask away from his face. "Better. Mama, I heard the nurses talking. They said we might have to go live with other people." Elena took his hand. "What do you think about that?" "I think they don't understand us," David said seriously. "They think we're broken because we don't have money. But we're not broken, are we?" "No, baby. We're not broken. We're just different." "Good different or bad different?" Elena smiled. "The best kind of different. The kind that changes the world." David squeezed her hand. "Mama, I want to tell you something." "What's that?" "When I was really sick, when I was seeing things that weren't there, I kept thinking about the story you used to tell us. About the 3 little pigs." "What about it?" "The wolf kept trying to blow down their house, but they built it so strong that nothing could destroy it. That's us, isn't it? We built our family so strong that nothing can blow it down." Elena's throat tightened. "That's exactly us. So we're going to be okay? We're going to be better than okay. We're going to be extraordinary." That evening, Elena made a phone call she'd been avoiding for 3 years. "Carmen? It's Elena." "Elena? Jesus, what's wrong now?" "David's in the hospital with pneumonia. And Child Services is trying to take my kids away." Silence on the other end of the line. "Carmen? Are you there?" "I'm here. I'm just—" "Elena, maybe this is for the best." Elena closed her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe it's time to face reality. You're a single woman with no education and no money, trying to raise 3 kids who aren't even yours. Maybe they would be better off." "Stop." Elena's voice was quiet but deadly. "Just stop. Elena, those children are mine in every way that matters. I have loved them, protected them, sacrificed for them, and fought for them every single day for 3 years. They are my children, Carmen. And if you can't understand that, then you're not my sister." Elena hung up and immediately dialed another number. "Hello. Is this Father Miguel? This is Elena Vasquez. I used to attend St. Catherine's with my father." "Elena. Of course, I remember you. How are you, Mija?" "I need help, Father. And I need to know if the church still believes in protecting families." The next morning, Elena walked into the Child Services office with an army. Father Miguel stood to her right, a man whose voice carried weight in the community, whose word was trusted, whose presence commanded respect. To her left stood Dr. Martinez from the hospital, who had spent the night reviewing David's case and Elena's situation. Behind them came Mrs. Rodriguez with a folder full of financial assistance paperwork, and 3 teachers from the children's school who had volunteered to testify about Marcus and Sophia's academic performance and emotional stability. Linda Chun looked up from her desk, clearly surprised by the delegation. "Mrs. Vasquez, I wasn't expecting this." "Ms. Chun," Father Miguel said, his voice carrying the authority of 40 years in the ministry, "I understand you're considering removing the Vasquez children from their home." "Father, with all due respect, this is a matter of child welfare." "Exactly," Dr. Martinez interrupted. "Which is why I'm here to provide medical testimony. David Vasquez's pneumonia was caused by environmental factors that are easily correctable. His mother brought him for treatment as soon as his condition became serious, and she has secured financial assistance to ensure his continued care. There is no medical reason to remove these children from their home." Mrs. Patterson, the children's 3rd-grade teacher, stepped forward. "Marcus and Sophia Vasquez are among the brightest, most well-behaved students I've ever taught. They're helpful, kind, and clearly loved. Their recent absences were due to their brother's illness and their mother's work schedule, both temporary situations that are now resolved." Elena watched Linda Chen's face as her carefully constructed case began to crumble. The social worker looked through the paperwork, the testimonials, the evidence that Elena wasn't a neglectful mother, but a woman doing everything possible to keep her family together under impossible circumstances. "Mrs. Vasquez," Linda Chen said finally, "these are impressive character references. But the fundamental issues remain. Your housing situation, your work schedule, your financial instability are being addressed," Father Miguel said firmly. "St. Catherine's has a family assistance program. We're prepared to help Mrs. Vasquez with housing, childcare, and job training. The church believes in keeping families together, Ms. Chun, and we have resources to make that possible." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She'd been fighting alone for so long, she'd forgotten what it felt like to have people stand beside her. Furthermore, Dr. Martinez added, I've reviewed the psychological evaluation that was done on David. The conclusions were based on outdated methodologies and clear bias. I'm prepared to conduct a new evaluation that focuses on the children's actual mental health rather than their socioeconomic status. Linda Chun was quiet for a long moment, studying the faces around her. Elena could see the calculation in her eyes. The political cost of removing children from a family that clearly had community support, the potential media attention, the questions about whether child services was targeting families for being poor rather than protecting children from actual harm. I'll need to review all of this documentation, Linda Chin said finally. And I'll want to conduct one more home visit. Of course, Elena said. When? Tomorrow. And Mrs. Vasquez? This is your last chance. If I find any evidence that these children are not being properly cared for, I will remove them immediately. Do you understand? Elena met her eyes steadily. I understand. And you'll find that my children are exactly where they belong. As they left the Child Services office, Father Miguel put his hand on Elena's shoulder. Mija, why didn't you come to us sooner? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Because I was afraid you'd think I wasn't good enough either. Elena, look at me. She met his kind eyes. God doesn't make mistakes. Those children were meant to be yours, and you were meant to be their mother. Anyone who can't see that isn't looking with the eyes of faith. That night, Elena sat on David's hospital bed with Marcus and Sophia curled up beside her, reading them the story of the 3 little pigs. When she got to the part about the wolf huffing and puffing, David pulled his oxygen mask away from his face. Mama, he said, I think our house is strong enough now. Elena smiled. I think you're right, baby. But even as she spoke the words, Elena knew the real test was still coming. Because Victoria Blackwood hadn't played her final card yet. And when she did, it would be devastating. The question was, would their house be strong enough to survive what was coming? Elena was about to find out. 20 years later, Elena Vasquez stood in an orange jumpsuit behind bulletproof glass, her hands shackled, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes hollow with the kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting a battle you know you can't win. Mama. Elena looked up to see 3 faces she'd memorized in childhood, now transformed by time and success into the adults she'd always known they could become. David, 31 years old, wore a perfectly tailored suit and carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had never lost a case. Marcus, 30, had the gentle bearing of someone who spent his days healing others, his doctor's coat traded for civilian clothes, but his healer's hands still steady and sure. Sophia, also 30, had the sharp eyes of an investigative journalist who had built her career on exposing corruption and finding truth in the darkest places. My babies, Elena whispered, pressing her palm against the glass. David placed his hand opposite hers, and for a moment, they were just a mother and son separated by circumstances beyond their control. Mama, we're going to get you out of here, David said, his voice carrying the same determination Elena remembered from the 11-year-old boy who had promised to protect his family. The evidence against me is overwhelming, Elena said quietly. My fingerprints on the knife, witnesses who saw me arguing with Victoria Blackwood, security footage of me leaving the charity gala around the time of her death. Even I'm starting to wonder if I did it. Stop, Sophia said firmly. Mama, look at me. You did not kill Victoria Blackwood. And we're going to prove it. Elena's laugh was bitter. How? I was there that night. I did argue with her. I was angry enough to. God help me. I was angry enough to want her dead. Wanting someone dead and actually killing them are 2 very different things, Marcus said gently. And we know you, Mama. We know your heart. You couldn't take a life, no matter how much that person had hurt you. Elena closed her eyes, remembering that terrible night 3 weeks ago. The Blackwood Foundation's annual charity gala, an event she'd only attended because the cleaning company she now owned had been hired to handle the post-event cleanup. She'd been setting up supplies in the kitchen when Victoria Blackwood had appeared, as elegant and cruel as ever at 75 years old. Elena Vasquez, Victoria had said, her voice dripping with disdain. Still cleaning up other people's messes, I see. Mrs. Blackwood. Elena had kept her voice neutral, professional. After 20 years of building her business from nothing, she'd learned to control her temper. I heard about your little success story, Victoria had continued. 3 adopted children, all college graduates, all doing so well for themselves. How quaint. They're remarkable people. Yes, well, breeding will tell, won't it? I always wondered where those children really came from. Street orphans don't usually turn out so well unless there's some hidden advantage. Elena's hands had tightened on the cleaning supplies. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, dear. I'm stating a fact. Those children were never really yours, were they? You were just keeping them warm until their real family claimed them. Their real family is me. Victoria's smile had been sharp as a blade. Is it? Because I have it on good authority that their biological parents weren't the drug addicts everyone assumed. In fact, I have reason to believe those children come from a very prominent family. A family that might be very interested to learn where their missing grandchildren ended up. Elena's blood had turned to ice. You're lying. Am I? Elena, dear, did you really think I'd spend 20 years watching you without learning everything there was to know about those children? About their real parents? About the car accident that supposedly killed their family? What car accident? Victoria's laugh had been like breaking glass. Oh, my dear. You really don't know, do you? Those children aren't orphans, Elena. They're heirs. Heirs to a fortune that makes my wealth look like pocket change. And their grandfather has been looking for them for 23 years. Elena had felt the world tilt beneath her feet. That's impossible. Is it? Think about it, Elena. 3 children, clearly well-bred despite their circumstances. Intelligent beyond their years. Resilient in ways that suggest good genetics. Did you really think they were just random street children? Even if that were true, it doesn't matter. They're my children now. Are they? Because I've already made contact with their grandfather. He's very interested in reuniting with his family. And he has the resources to make that happen, regardless of what some cleaning lady thinks she's entitled to. Elena had gripped the knife she'd been using to open supply boxes, her knuckles white with tension. You stay away from my children. Your children? Elena, they were never your children. You were just a temporary caretaker. And now it's time for them to come home. I'll fight you. With what? You're nobody, Elena. You always have been, and you always will be. Those children deserve better than a life built on lies. Elena had raised the knife, not to threaten, but to point it at Victoria in emphasis. Those children are mine. I raised them, I loved them, I sacrificed everything for them. And I will not let you destroy our family. Our family? Victoria's voice had risen. Elena, you stole those children. You built your entire life on a foundation of theft, just like when you stole food from my kitchen. You're a thief, Elena. You always have been. I saved them. You kidnapped them. The argument had escalated, voices rising, accusations flying. Other people at the gala had started to notice, to whisper, to stare. Elena had realized she was making a scene, that she was giving Victoria exactly what she wanted. Evidence that Elena was unstable, unfit, dangerous. She'd put down the knife and walked away. 2 hours later, Victoria Blackwood was found dead in the kitchen, stabbed through the heart with the same knife Elena had been holding. Now, sitting in a jail cell awaiting trial for murder, Elena wondered if Victoria had been right all along. Maybe she was a thief. Maybe she had stolen those children from their real family. Maybe everything she'd built was a lie. Mama, David said, pulling her back to the present. I need you to tell me everything about that night. Every detail, no matter how small. Elena recounted the argument, the accusations, the moment she'd walked away. When she finished, her 3 children exchanged glances. Mama, Sophia said carefully, did you believe her? About us having a grandfather who's been looking for us. Elena met her daughter's eyes. I don't know what to believe anymore. Marcus leaned forward. Mama, it doesn't matter where we came from. It doesn't matter if we have biological family somewhere. You are our mother. You have been since the day you found us. Nothing Victoria Blackwood said changes that. But what if she was right? What if I did steal you from your real family? Then we're grateful you did, David said firmly. Because our real family is the one that chose us, loved us, and fought for us every single day. Our real family is you. Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I love you 3 so much. We love you too, Mama. And we're going to prove your innocence. How? David smiled, and Elena saw the brilliant, determined boy she'd raised. By doing what you taught us to do. By fighting for our family. Over the next week, Elena watched from her cell as her children waged war on her behalf. David attacked the case from every legal angle, filing motions to suppress evidence, challenging witness testimony, and exposing the rushed investigation that had focused on Elena from the moment her fingerprints were found on the knife. Marcus conducted his own investigation into Victoria's death, using his medical knowledge to examine the autopsy report and crime scene photos. What he found was disturbing. Victoria had been poisoned with a rare toxin hours before she was stabbed. The knife wound, while fatal, had been inflicted on a woman who was already dying. Sophia used her investigative skills to dig into Victoria's life, her finances, her family relationships. What she uncovered was a web of greed, betrayal, and murder that went far deeper than anyone had imagined. The breakthrough came when Sophia discovered that Victoria had recently changed her will, leaving her entire fortune to charity instead of to her son, Richard Blackwood. Richard, who had been drowning in gambling debts and failed business ventures, stood to lose everything when his mother died. But the real revelation came when Marcus analyzed the security footage from the charity gala. The timestamp showed Elena leaving the kitchen at 9:47 p.m. Victoria's body was discovered at 10:15 p.m. But the medical evidence showed that Victoria had been poisoned between 6 o'clock and 7 p.m., hours before Elena had even arrived at the gala. Someone wanted it to look like a crime of passion, David explained to Elena during one of their visits. They poisoned Victoria earlier in the evening, then waited for the right moment to stage her stabbing. When you had that argument with her, when you picked up that knife, you gave them the perfect opportunity to frame you. But who would do such a thing? Someone who knew about your history with Victoria. Someone who knew you'd be at the gala that night. Someone who had access to both the poison and the kitchen. The answer came during the trial, when David called Richard Blackwood to the stand. "Mr. Blackwood," David said, his voice calm and professional, "where were you between 6 o'clock and 7 p.m. on the night of your mother's death?" "I was at the gala, mingling with guests." "And can anyone verify that?" Richard shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sure someone saw me." "Actually, Mr. Blackwood, we have security footage showing you in the kitchen during that time period. The same kitchen where your mother was later found dead. I was checking on the catering arrangements." "Were you? Or were you slipping poison into your mother's drink?" The prosecutor objected, but David was just getting started. "Mr. Blackwood, did you know that your mother had recently changed her will?" "Ah, yes. And did you know that under the new will, you would inherit nothing?" Richard's face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. "That's not. I mean, Mr. Blackwood, you discovered that your mother had disinherited you. You knew she would be at the charity gala. You knew Elena Vasquez would be there as well, and you knew about their history. So you poisoned your mother early in the evening, then waited for the perfect opportunity to frame someone else for her murder. That's ridiculous. Is it? Because we have evidence that you purchased the poison used to kill your mother. We have your fingerprints on the glass she drank from. And we have testimony from 3 witnesses who saw you arguing with your mother about money just days before her death." Richard Blackwood's composure cracked completely. "She was going to leave everything to charity. Everything. Do you know what it's like to grow up with that kind of wealth, that kind of expectation, only to have it ripped away because your mother decides you're not worthy? So you killed her. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. The poison was supposed to look like a heart attack. But then she started arguing with that cleaning woman, and I saw an opportunity to make it look like someone else did it. Elena Vasquez had motive, she had opportunity, and everyone knew she hated my mother." The courtroom erupted. Elena sat in stunned silence as her children's faces lit up with triumph and relief. Richard Blackwood was arrested on the spot. The charges against Elena were dropped immediately. As Elena walked out of the courthouse a free woman, she found her 3 children waiting for her on the steps. "Mama," Marcus said, pulling her into a fierce hug, "welcome home." Elena looked at David, Sophia, and Marcus. The 3 children she'd found dying in a cardboard box 23 years ago, now grown into extraordinary adults who had just saved her life, and felt her heart overflow with pride and love. "You know," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "Victoria was wrong about one thing." "What's that?" Sophia asked. "She said love wasn't enough. But look at us. Look at what we built together. Look at what you became. Love was enough, babies. Love was everything." David smiled. "No, Mama. Love wasn't enough." Elena's face fell. "Love was more than enough," David continued. "Love was miraculous." As they walked down the courthouse steps together, a family reunited, vindicated, and stronger than ever, Elena realized that Victoria Blackwood had been right about one thing. The children she'd found weren't ordinary street orphans. They were extraordinary human beings who had grown up to be exactly what the world needed. A lawyer who fought for justice, a doctor who healed the broken, and a journalist who exposed the truth. And they were hers. They had always been hers. Not because of biology or law or circumstance, but because of love. The kind of love that builds families, changes lives, and saves the world. One child at a time. 6 months after Elena's exoneration, the Vasquez family gathered around a familiar kitchen table. Not the wobbly one from their old apartment above the laundromat, but a sturdy oak table in the house David, Marcus, and Sophia had bought for their mother. It was a modest home in a good neighborhood, with a garden Elena tended every morning and a front porch where she could watch the sunrise with her coffee. "Mama," Sophia said, setting down a stack of newspapers, "you need to see this." Elena looked at the headlines spread across the table. Blackwood Empire crumbles as heir convicted of murder. Justice served. Mother freed after children's investigation exposes real killer. From street to success, the Vasquez family story. "They want to interview you," Marcus added. "All the major networks. They're calling it the story of the year." Elena shook her head. "I don't want to be famous for this." "You're not famous for this," David said gently. "You're famous for what you did 23 years ago. For seeing 3 dying children and choosing love over convenience. For fighting a system that tried to tear us apart. For raising us to be the kind of people who could save you when you needed saving." Elena traced her finger along the edge of the newspaper photo. A picture of her walking out of the courthouse with her 3 children. All of them smiling, all of them free. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found you that night?" "No," Marcus said immediately. "Because you did find us. And that's all that matters. But what if Victoria was right? What if you do have a grandfather somewhere, looking for you?" Sophia reached across the table and took Elena's hand. "Mama, do you remember what you told us about forever?" Elena smiled. "Forever means forever." "Exactly. It doesn't matter if we have biological family somewhere. It doesn't matter where we came from or who we might have been. We are who we are because of you. We are your children forever and always." David pulled out a manila folder. "Actually, Mama, we did some research into Victoria's claims about our background." Elena's breath caught. "And she was lying," David said simply. "We found the police reports from the night you found us. We were abandoned by parents who were struggling with addiction. There's no mysterious grandfather, no hidden fortune, no secret family looking for us. Victoria made it all up to hurt you." Elena felt a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying lift from her shoulders. "Why would she do that?" "Because she knew the one thing that could break you was the fear that we weren't really yours," Marcus said. "She knew that your greatest strength, your love for us, was also your greatest vulnerability." "But she was wrong," Sophia added. "Because even if we had come from some wealthy family, even if there had been a grandfather looking for us, it wouldn't have mattered. You're our mother. You chose us and we chose you. That's not something that can be taken away." Elena looked around the table at her 3 children, successful, brilliant, kind adults who had grown up to be everything she'd dreamed they could be, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. "You know," she said softly, "when I found you 3 that night, I thought I was saving you. But you saved me too. You gave me a purpose, a reason to fight, a reason to become better than I ever thought I could be." "We saved each other," David said. "That's what families do." Marcus stood up and walked to the kitchen counter, returning with a small wrapped box. "Mama, we have something for you." Elena opened the box to find a simple gold locket. Inside was a tiny photo of the 4 of them from David's law school graduation. Elena in the center, her 3 children surrounding her, all of them beaming with pride and joy. "It's beautiful," Elena whispered. "Read the inscription," Sophia said. Elena turned the locket over. Engraved in delicate script were the words, "Love was enough. Love was everything. Your children forever." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "I love you 3 so much." "We love you too, Mama," Marcus said. "And we always will." As they sat together in the warm kitchen, sharing stories and laughter, Elena thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. The fear, the struggle, the nights when she'd wondered if love really was enough. The system that had tried to tear them apart. The enemies who had underestimated the power of a family built on choice rather than chance. "Mama," David said, interrupting her thoughts, "there's something else we want to discuss with you." "What's that?" "We've been talking, and we want to start a foundation. The Elena Vasquez Foundation for Family Preservation. We want to help other families like ours, families that the system wants to break apart because they don't fit the traditional mold." Elena's breath caught. "You want to name it after me?" You're the one who taught us that families aren't defined by biology or wealth or social status, Sophia said. You're the one who showed us that love really can conquer everything. Who better to name it after? I don't know what to say. Say yes, Marcus said with a grin. Because we've already filed the paperwork. Elena laughed, the first truly carefree laugh she'd had in months. You three are impossible. We learn from the best, David said. As the evening wound down and her children prepared to leave for their own homes, Elena walked them to the front door. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, safe. Everything she'd dreamed of giving them when they were small. Mama, Sophia said, pausing on the front porch. Do you ever regret it? Taking us in that night? All the struggle, all the pain, all the years of fighting. Elena looked at her daughter, brilliant, successful, kind, and shook her head. Never. Not for a single second. You three are the best thing that ever happened to me. Even when we were difficult teenagers who thought we knew everything? Especially then, Elena said with a smile. Because even when you were driving me crazy, I knew you were mine. And I knew that someday, you'd grow up to be exactly who you were meant to be. And who were we meant to be? Marcus asked. Elena looked at her three children, a lawyer who fought for justice, a doctor who healed the broken, a journalist who exposed the truth, and felt her heart swell with pride. You were meant to be the people who make the world better, she said. You were meant to be living proof that love really is enough. You were meant to be my children. After they left, Elena sat on her front porch with a cup of tea, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Tomorrow, she would start working with the foundation her children had created. She would help other families fight the same battles she had fought, armed with the knowledge that love really could conquer everything. But tonight, she was simply a mother who had raised three extraordinary children, who had been saved by the very people she had once saved, who had learned that the greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from building something so beautiful and strong that your enemy's hatred becomes irrelevant. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message from David. Mama, thank you for never giving up on us. Thank you for showing us what real strength looks like. Thank you for being our mother. We love you forever. Elena smiled and typed back. Thank you for being my children. Thank you for saving me right back. I love you forever too. As she prepared to go inside, Elena noticed a young woman walking down the street, pushing a stroller with three small children inside. The woman looked tired, overwhelmed, alone, the way Elena had looked 23 years ago. Elena stood up and walked to her front gate. Excuse me, she called softly. Are you okay? Do you need help? The woman looked up, her eyes wary but hopeful. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother anyone. We're looking for somewhere safe to spend the night. Elena's heart clenched with recognition and purpose. What are your names? I'm Sarah. These are my triplets, Emma, Jake, and Lily. We've been staying in shelters, but... Sarah's voice trailed off. Elena opened her gate. Sarah, would you and your children like to come inside? I have soup on the stove and a warm place to sleep. And tomorrow, we can figure out how to help you build the life you want for your family. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Why would you help us? You don't even know us. Elena smiled, thinking of three children in a cardboard box, of a choice that had changed everything, of love that had proven to be more than enough. Because someone once told me that families aren't born, they're built. And sometimes building a family starts with opening your door to someone who needs a safe place to land. As Elena led Sarah and her children into the warm house, she realized that her story wasn't ending. It was beginning again. Because love doesn't just save the people you choose to love. It creates a ripple effect that spreads outward, touching lives you'll never know, building families you'll never meet, changing the world one act of kindness at a time. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the children you save grow up to save you right back. Elena Vasquez had learned that love really was enough. But more than that, she'd learned that love was everything. And that was a lesson worth sharing with the world.